grade 1 to 8. One-room schoolhouses were built by settlers of the area when the number of kids rose. The early schoolhouses had 4 walls with 1 or 2 windows to allow just enough sunlight so the students could see their work. All desks were built to seat 2 students, ranging in size so that younger children and older children could sit comfortably. To become a teacher at a one-room schoolhouse, a man or woman was required to be able to read, write, and manage the students. Normally, the teachers were male and were called schoolmasters. If a teacher was female, they would have to have been single and weren't allowed to teach if they were married. Students would start the day by either walking, riding their horse, or riding their sleigh to school, depending on how far they lived or what time of year it was. Horses were kept in the barn until it was time to go home. To start the day, the teacher or an older student would arrive at the school and start a fire in the wood stove to make sure the building was warm in the winter. Students were not allowed to enter the school until the teacher rang the bell. And after a student had raised the flag outside. Once inside, all the students would stand, sing O Canada, and say the Lord's Prayer. Students were seated according to their grade, with younger students in the front and older students in the back. The first subjects of the day taught were reading and writing, where students would take turns reading out loud and others would practice their penmanship. After recess, they would learn arithmetic, which was taught by drill, where students would learn to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, where they would solve the problem in their head and recite to the teacher as fast as they could. After lunch, lessons were dedicated to special subjects, such as history, geography, and even speech making. To complete their lessons, students would write on slates, and just this one right here. Or they would use copybooks if they could afford one, which contained blank paper where they would write lines on with a quill and ink. Every day they had recess breaks, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, as well as a break to eat lunch. Recess was filled with games. They would play with toys they brought from home. Often games of catch would be played with a ball of yarn. Other games such as marbles, tag, or even races were played to pass the time. For lunch, each student would bring a basket or a tin pail for their lunch, which would contain homemade bread covered with jam or soup made at home, which would be warmed on the wood stove. Many schools, such as this one, had a gardening club, where each student would have a patch of garden where they would learn to grow vegetables. During the cold winter months, students would make a hot vegetable soup on the wood stove. Everyone would share and help clean up afterwards. To use the washroom during the day, there was no indoor plumbing, so the school had 2 outhouses, one for the boys and one for the girls. To avoid wasting time, the teacher would only allow 1 student to go. For water, there was a jug in the back. Water was brought in from a well outside or brought in from home from a student. All the students would share 1 cup, or they would use a paper cup, which they would reuse until it fell apart. During the day, the teacher would have to keep the students in line. They would do so by providing punishments. Students were disciplined for arriving late, falling asleep in class, fighting, or even answering questions incorrectly. Punishments included writing lines on the blackboard over and over again, standing in the corner for a period of time, or even balancing a book on their head in front of the class until the teacher told them to stop. Each day, students would have chores they had to complete, such as sweeping the floor, washing the blackboard, or cleaning the windows. At the end of the day, the teacher would make sure all the chores were completed and assign the chores for the next day. Many schools, every Friday, they had a spelling bee, where the teacher would pick 2 team captains who would pick their teams, and the students would take turns spelling, and if you spelt a word wrong, you would have to sit down, and the last one standing wins. In December, many schools would hold a Christmas concert, where the entire community would be packed into the schoolhouse, which was completely decorated. Students would perform songs, recite readings, and perform a special presentation or speech, which the students created on their own, followed by Santa Claus, who would hand out nuts, candy, and oranges. Often schools in the same area would have a field day, where everyone gets together and spends the day playing baseball, races, and other games. Students from each school would dress in similar outfits to show which school they belong to, as well as march with their school banner. Finally, at the end of the school year, on the last day, students would students would have a picnic to celebrate with games, prizes, ice cream, and a big potluck with the entire community. Thank you for visiting our school. If you would like to learn more about the museum or see the school in person, check out the links in our description.